So, good afternoon. I welcome you onto the post-lunch session of Gulbarga Sharana Basaveshwara session. And it's a wonderful topic to have. What is not found in the textbook? More interestingly, the organizers have picked up a very seasoned speakers. That's more important. Particularly earlier, when we wanted a promotion, it was actually time bound and a vacancy bound. Now MCA has added one more thing, what we call it as publications to be. But in a hurry, most of the people will rush the paper to have once again disappointment that they will come back. So we have great orator, Dr. Lakshman sir will speak on how and why papers are rejected.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. A very good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. It is customary when you start a talk to thank the organizers for the opportunity. In this instance, I have to thank myself for giving myself this opportunity for the talk. But more seriously, I must say that our chairman of the scientific committee, Dr. Sopimat, was very keen that we explain the process of selection of abstracts to a conference. It is nearly the same as the process of selection of a paper when you submit an abstract to a journal. So I have expanded the scope of his initial suggestion to let you know how people evaluate your submission of an abstract, either at a conference or for a journal, so that you can be prepared for it, so that you can be prepared and you can put in a good abstract which will have a good chance of being selected. What I would like to touch on is the basic process that's involved. You must understand that first. We must look at the factors leading to rejection and how to maximize acceptance. I can't give you a magic wand with which you can make sure that your abstract is accepted. Even as late as last year, one of our own papers was rejected. So rejection is a way of life. It's not something that you should take negatively. But let us look at what maximizes the chances of acceptance. I call this process reverse engineering because once you know what happens when you put in an abstract, then you will know how to do it. You put it into a conference or a chief editor, he can himself reject it at a given stage because he finds it so poor in quality that he doesn't think it deserves a peer review. Otherwise, he will put it in charge of an associate or a sub-editor who will send it to reviewers. These are your peers. In the case of a conference like this, it would go to a scientific committee which would look at it. And they give their inputs. In a conference, it's either rejected outright, and for example, in this conference, no paper was rejected. We wanted to encourage all the people, so everything was accepted, at least in a poster form. Several papers which were given as free paper submissions we found would not meet the requirements, and so they became posters. But in the case of a journal, what will happen is either it is rejected outright or it is accepted outright. Both of them are very uncommon. What most often happens is that the reviewers make their comments, and the people who have submitted it, they get their comments, and you are asked to incorporate those changes, and it goes through the same process again, and if they find that it is good, they will accept it. Now, what are the factors that lead to rejection? I think I put it in one little phrase. It is inadequate substance. What is substance in this? You must ask a good research question. It should be of clinical relevance. It must be a common problem. Or at the other end of the extreme, it could be a very unusual problem, which may find favor. There must be a design to the study. Most of the time, we find people who just enumerate what operations they have done and when the patient went home. There is absolutely no follow-up. Did that operation work? What were the complications? What were the difficulties found? How long was the complication? So if you have a randomized controlled trial, which is very difficult to have in surgery, but if you can have it, that's the best. At least a good prospective study for a good length of time with a proper follow-up. There must be a regimented fashion in which these people were seen, and documentation must be good. Which again, when you go for data, you must have a good number of people. If you have, for example, if any case series was less than 5 cases, it was never even considered for a free paper in this conference. And you must have the metrics to be right. What did you measure to measure the outcome. Was it good? Was it only clinical? Was an investigation required? Was it an appropriate investigation? If you have an ultrasound measurement for the assessment of a retroperitoneal tumor, obviously it would not be accepted. You need to have a minimum of a CT assessment, because without it, you really can't be accurate about your metrics. And conclusions, you saw time and again that the conclusions must be supported by your data. If you have studied, for example, the complication rate, seroma rate in a ventral hernia repair, compare it between open and laparoscopic, and then in your conclusions, because you have picked up things from the book, you then start saying that laparoscopy is more expensive, it takes more time. That is not acceptable. Whatever conclusions, it may be a one-line conclusion, but that conclusion must be supported by your data. If you think that you have more and more lines and more points in your conclusion slide, it actually defeats the purpose of your writing the paper. Now, additional factors are secondary, but of some importance. You need to know where you have to submit your paper. That doesn't apply to a conference, but when you're submitting it to a journal, is that journal local or global? If you have a local problem, it is unlikely that it will be accepted in a global paper. Is it a general journal like the British Journal of Surgery or Indian Journal of Surgery, or is it something very specific about minimally invasive surgery? And journal impact factor, we talked about impact factor, it's a factor which measures the number of times an article from a given journal is cited, is quoted by others. If you have a high impact journal factor, it's more popular, and it is more difficult to get acceptance. So it's not wrong to go to a lower impact factor when you start submitting your papers. You can also have access to open access. The problem with open access is predatory journals, and the predatory journals are something we have to avoid and keep a long distance from. It's extremely important that we do not ever entertain predatory journals just because you have to publish. They publish by accepting money, there is no peer review. And if you want to know whether a given journal is a predatory journal or a proper open access journal, that is the website to see, doaj.org. If you see that, and if your journal that you propose to put your paper in is on that list, then you're on safe ground. Now, a few minutes about how you can maximize acceptance of your paper. I would strongly recommend people who have not done this to please visit this site, icmje.org. It is the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors website. They give you extensive and very, very useful information about how to write a paper. There are many, many sites, but this is one of my favorites. It also tells you a lot of things about ethical factors behind choosing the author list, for example, and making a lot of the different segments of how to write the different segments of your paper. Now, please understand that the paper has several components. It has a title, it has the abstract, it has the materials and methods, the results, the discussion, and the conclusion. These are the major things, and every one of them is important. But of importance, in the order of its occurrence, I would put abstract the first. That's very important because that's the only thing people read. They don't read your complete paper. They read the abstract, and this abstract is not impressive, it won't get marks. The title also is important. You need to have a short and crisp title, perhaps in a phrase, just enough to raise the curiosity of the reader. I'm going to spend a few minutes on the abstract because this is what we all saw when papers were submitted to this conference, for example. It happens in every conference. Very, very lacking in substance. Now, you need to understand that it must have a structured pattern to it. It must have an introduction, a materials and methods, results, and a conclusion. The only thing that the abstract does not have, that a paper has, is the discussion part. Discussion is only exclusively found in the paper. Even though it's read first, you must write it last, and that's the best of the things. And you must understand what is the main message you're going to give from your paper, and what is the data that you have in your study that justifies that main aim or conclusion that you're giving, you're propounding. Now, introduction is I see some abstracts with a very large introduction. That is unnecessary. All you have to say is what is being studied. All you have to know, what is being, what is already known about the subject, what is lacking, and what is lacking is what you're going to say. And that's why you can then justify why you're doing what you're doing. Materials and methods have to be quite detailed, and again, I would refer you to this. I'll make this PowerPoint available to all of you if you like. I can instruct our audiovisual person. Please note these things. These are websites which are free access and which give you enough information. Now, when you're writing the materials and methods, they focus on the adequate numbers of subjects in the study. They define, they look at the inclusion and exclusion criteria and a detailed method of how you did the study. And that is something that is very, very important. Results are, it's perhaps the most difficult to say in an abstract, what is it that you want to project. You have a lot of results in your paper. You have to curtail it to sit into a very small paragraph. I would recommend that you write the primary outcomes first. Whatever your primary outcome is, you have secondary outcomes, you can even leave it out if necessary. Always give the summary statistics in that abstract which justifies your conclusion on the primary outcome. That is a very important thing. And it's very important to know that you do not do anything in terms of starting a discussion in that place. Discussion doesn't apply to an abstract, but it applies to a paper that you give. It has to primarily project your principal findings. Straight off, you write yourself the strengths and weaknesses. I focus on these weaknesses of your study so that people know that you have already recognized it. Give them what other papers say and describe the mechanisms as to why you think there are differences or concurrences between your work and others' work. Using a reference is extremely important. It is important and ethical, first of all. Forget about it being legal, which it is. It is ethical that we recognize somebody else's work. It also protects you against allegations of plagiarism. And it makes your life simple, in fact, because you can project a progress of your work from where you took off and where you're adding to the scientific knowledge. I would strongly recommend that wherever you present your paper, particularly the journal that you're presenting it to, read the instructions to authors. Even though the general pattern is the same, there will be differences of the requirement of how you present your paper to different journals, and you've got to conform to that journal's requirement. Rejection is a fact of life. Never ever get dejected by this. Do not be disheartened. But read all the comments that the reviewers have made. This doesn't apply to a conference submission because you don't get a detailed analysis, but for every paper you get a detailed analysis. Go through what they have found as a deficiency, correct it and put it to another journal, and you will get an acceptance. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that has been a sort of peek into the world of publication, and I thank you for your patient listening.
So, it's not that easy to make this vast topic into a concise form. Thank you very much, sir. Very good presentations. Only one question, sir.
I know the intention behind preparing this talk, so I'm sure the Lakshman would permit us and use this PPT. It will be uploaded to the website. And many of you are taking screenshot and all that. Don't worry about that. This PPT will be available for all of you, and many other academic PPTs will be available to you online for download so that you can use them in future. So that's what arrangement we are going to make. I hope so, I have everybody's permission for this.
Thank you. There are very senior people here who are authors. We still have 2.5 minutes for discussion, sir.
Yeah.
There is time for 2.5 minutes.
In case if somebody wants us.
Okay. It's fine, sir.
Comments, questions?
No. Only thing I found is the best suggestion what you give is don't get dejected when it gets refused. That is the best comment what I heard from me. Though all his guidelines are very educative, I think even for me I got a couple of messages. But the last one is what is good for the youngsters. Don't get, because it gets rejected. Sir, anyway it gets rejected, why I should? See, the reason behind this, when you get rejected, go in and see why particularly it is rejected. That will refine you. I think the next time when you apply, you have a better chance of. So that is a very good message, I think, for the youngsters.
Sir, most useful for the last slide. I think if you can put that to the younger. This.
Yeah, for the information of the postgraduates and other people, that when you submit an article like this, it's always if there is a comparative study, is always better than drawing any, as has been already pointed out. And also, one doesn't have to get a very complicated study for that matter, because it is published in this, that. What is relevant to our situation, what maximum number of patients you treat, that can be made as a study, rather than getting the things more complicated.
Very true, sir.
Sir, yesterday when Tejaswini presented the OR guidelines and the checklist, there was a comment that I think India is not far behind in terms of the West, in terms of So I think the surgeon, plastic surgeon who said that, I think I do agree that quality of surgery wise, Indians are on par with the world, or if you have to, they are maybe a step ahead. But in terms of our documentation, in terms of, and I think Munishekar has shown very clearly, in terms of documentation and also in terms of publication, we lag very far behind. So what are your suggestions and thoughts on this?
Munishekar's slides basically explains what we think should be done. I think the first thing is that we should take away the hierarchy in our teaching institutions. I think students are scared to differ with their professors, they're scared to express their views. I think we must clearly have a situation where they can discuss openly. When they discuss, the senior has a chance to nail them on evidence. If they talk frivolously, you can always say, look, give me evidence and I'll listen to you. That's what I do. I think all my associates are very free to talk to me, and but I demand evidence. And so that first takes them to the journals. They have to go beyond textbooks. You have to go beyond textbooks to do any of this work. So once they go to the journals, it stimulates their juices, sir, and they'll then start collecting data and doing the things. No easy solutions, but I think the beginning is for the postgraduates to regularly read journals.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.